Have you ever heard someone say, "I can't hear myself think"? It's usually a complaint about not being able to focus or concentrate as a result of noise nuisance. But what I want to do today is see if we can tame that effect and use it as a form of meditation to bring about a sense of calm and to be in control of our own thoughts. So today, this is a bit of an experiment. You're watching me walk somewhere noisy to try it out. Before we get into it, this video requires a cautionary disclaimer, not so much for my protection as for yours. I'm not a mental health professional. Nothing I present here should ever take precedence over professional advice, therapy or treatment. Also, if this even works at all, I don't expect that to be true for everyone, because we don't all function in the same way. So if you feel you do want to try it and you find that it doesn't work out, it's not your fault. Don't hurt yourself trying to make it work. Something completely different might work better for you. So I've been walking briskly for a while, which has raised my respiration rate. So the first thing I need to do is to find somewhere to sit amid this noise and bustle and just spend a moment or two listening to my own breathing as it returns to a normal, resting rhythm. We're going to take our time to allow that to happen. Just breathe the way your body wants to breathe for a minute or two. While this is happening, there are lots of sounds in the surrounding scene. At the moment, we don't care about them. We'll just allow those sounds to happen without trying to understand them. Now we're going to close our eyes and start listening to the sounds around and about, starting with the noises that are physically closest by. The traffic is streaming past on the road. We're going to listen to that and try to understand it. What kind of sounds are we hearing? Can we perceive the noises of the engines? Can we hear the sounds of the tyres on the road? If there's more than one vehicle, can we separate out the perception of sound from each one? Still with eyes closed, can we identify the types of vehicles we're hearing? Maybe cars, vans, larger trucks, motorbikes. All of them make different sounds. Can we tease out the perception of those differences without looking at them? What about different makes or models of car? Do they sound different from each other? Can we perceive the differences? Now we're going to pick out the sound of one vehicle as it passes and try to keep hearing it as it goes away from us. Keep listening to it until it fades into silence or merges into the general noise, or perhaps is obscured by some new, louder noise that's closer. Let's try that again with another vehicle, maybe one going in a different direction. Just trying to hear it until we can't hear it anymore. Now we're going to try to listen to see if we can hear other noises that aren't from vehicles. These might be the voices of people somewhere, or the sounds of machinery, or other sounds of activity. Listening very carefully. What's the furthest away sound we can hear? We're going to listen and seek that faraway sound for a while, maybe waiting for momentary lulls in the nearby noise to see if we can catch the sound of something much further away. Then we ask ourselves, what is that sound? What's making that sound? Now, instead of trying to pick out individual sounds, we're going to try to listen to more than one sound at once. So concentrating on hearing maybe that far away noise, we're going to try to hold on to hearing that noise at the same time as hearing other noises. How many different sources of sound and noise can we hear all at once? And can we experience them as a collection of multiple sounds simultaneously, instead of focusing on just one part? Try to listen and hear a number of different things with the awareness that they are still a number of different things. Before we move on to the next part, we're just going to sit now, listening, allowing the totality of all of this noise to wash over us. Hearing it, experiencing it, processing and thinking about what it means. What was each one of these sounds? If they're sounds made by people in some way, what might they mean to those people? Were they the sounds of work, or travel, or something else? If they're sounds that are not made by people, what might be their purpose? Were they sounds that exist to be sounds? Or were they just noise that's a side effect of something else happening? Now, after this moment of reflection, we're going to allow ourselves to notice that all of these sounds are outside of us. Our entire attention has been filled with the listening and hearing and processing of stuff that isn't us. And this has hopefully occupied our thoughts quite entirely and fully. And as we come toward the end of this exercise, we now have the opportunity to establish a new relationship with the thoughts that were filling our brains before we started. Those thoughts have been completely pushed out of our minds by the experience of all this noise. And we now get to set the rules about which of those thoughts can come back in, and how much space they can occupy in our attention. We don't have to pretend to forget any of the things that might have been filling our head and demanding too much of our attention before we sat down and did all of this. But those thoughts come back into our heads on our terms, not their own. You are now the one that's in control of your thoughts. Your thoughts are subordinate to your control. You're the one who gets to decide how much space they will be allowed to take up in your attention. We'll just spend a few more moments now, eyes open, sitting and watching and listening to the traffic now. Then I'll wrap up the video with a bit of explanation about why I think this works. Okay, firstly, as I said at the start, this may not necessarily work for everyone, and if that's you, don't worry about it. You shouldn't have to force this. Maybe a different variation of the same technique but with different sounds might be what you need. Or maybe this whole idea isn't for you, and that's okay. We're not all the same. It would be a very boring world if we were. Maybe there's something better than this for you. For me though, this works, and here's what I think is going on. I like to think about stuff, so my brain gets a fair bit of exercise in that regard, which is great, really useful when I have something to work on. But it also has the downside that sometimes I'll find myself thinking intensively about something in a very unproductive way. You could call it worrying, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's more like worry without the emotional part. I just get some thoughts stuck in my head, usually related to some everyday problem or concern, and it just goes around and around without approaching any kind of conclusion. Maybe it's a thought about a thing where there isn't going to be a simple solution. In a situation like that, my mind will often get into a sort of feedback loop, where the unproductive thought sort of takes charge and demands that I occupy my attention on it. Maybe also parts of my mind become occupied with the concern that I'm thinking too much about this thing and not making any progress. Maybe I also start that thing where my head is too full of thinking to be able to sleep, and I might also start thinking about that and maybe worrying that the clock is ticking toward the time when I have to get up and I haven't even slept yet. I'm describing a situation where my thoughts are in control of me, against my benefit. Not only is this thinking in circles stressful, it's also completely useless because it's not getting me any closer to finishing thinking about the thing. But the human brain, or at least mine, has limitations on the number of things it can think about all at once. And that limitation is exploited by the exercise I went through earlier in this video. It really is as simple as methodically filling up my attention with a bunch of things, crowding out that persistent, unproductive, cyclical thought with a whole load of things that are maybe interesting but ultimately don't matter and are easy to drop when we're finished. I'm listening and thinking about listening until I can't hear myself think. This has a more profound effect than just momentarily distracting myself from my worries. It performs a sort of soft reset on my mind. It's not just a thought that we're crowding out, it's the shutdown of a self-sustaining, self-consuming feedback loop that was taking up the whole room. Of course, the problem underlying the thing that might have been consuming my thoughts hasn't necessarily gone away completely, especially if it's related to some real-world situation. But for me, at least, this really does allow me to exercise control over how much territory that thing is allowed to stake out in my mind when I do allow it back in. So this doesn't directly solve whatever that problem might be. It's not a magic spell. But I do find it puts me in a more stable frame of mind. And often that's a better way to face that problem. Also, it frees up a bit of thinking capacity so that I can look after myself and others and just generally keep the lights on, which is a vitally important part of living, no matter what else is going on. I usually do this with nature sounds in a quiet woodland, but I thought it'd be interesting to see if it works with artificial noise, and I think it did. At the end of the listening part, I genuinely did feel like the board had been wiped clear and I was ready for a fresh start on deciding what to think about. I hope this has been interesting, and do let me know in the comments if you use something like this or something else to manage your own unruly brain. Thanks for watching, and I hope you join me again tomorrow for the next door in the Advent calendar.